Welcome back to our channel. It was a year shadowed by the rise of global tensions. 1939. The world watched as distant thunderclouds of war loomed, though the United States remained, for a time, on the periphery. Factories churned with quiet urgency. Steel, copper, and nickel served not just commerce, but preparedness. Deep within the presses of the U.S. Mint, machines kept pace with a growing nation, rolling out coins in the millions. Among them, the humble wheat penny still bearing Abraham Lincoln's solemn profile, and those now classic twin wheat ears on the reverse remained a symbol of enduring American identity. It was familiar, unremarkable. Or so everyone thought. That year, the penny was struck at 3 different mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint, as usual, omitted a mint mark, while the San Francisco and Denver coins bore small identifying letters. To the naked eye, every 1939 penny looked just like the next. Copper-colored, 19 millimeters across, a small disc of pocket change that slipped through countless hands without ceremony. But beneath the surface, beneath its very metal, in fact something peculiar had happened. The anomaly did not make itself known in newspapers or financial records. It didn't bring attention with a headline or scandal. It waited, as all good secrets do, in silence. Not even those minting the coins seemed to notice. Perhaps it was the pressure of wartime preparation, or perhaps it was the sheer monotony of striking millions upon millions of nearly identical objects. Somewhere in that relentless mechanical rhythm, a mistake had slipped through. One that would take decades to reveal its true nature. The first man to truly see it wasn't even looking for it. Decades later, in the mid-1960s, a modest coin collector from Ohio, Charles Ingram, was flipping through a fresh lot of wheat pennies at a local flea market. His hobby wasn't glamorous, nor was it particularly lucrative, but it brought him joy. That day, he was hunting for double dies or off-center strikes, anything unusual. But when his eyes fell on a seemingly normal 1939 penny from Philadelphia, something tugged at his instincts. He couldn't say why at first. It wasn't heavier nor lighter. It didn't feel different in his hand. But there was something, a tiny aberration on the reverse. He brought the coin to his loop. And there it was. The E in 1 cent was distorted. Not dramatically. Not the kind of error that jumps off the coin and screams for recognition. No, this one whispered. It curved where it should have stood firm, bulged subtly, like a wrinkle in the very process of minting. Then he noticed a faint doubling near the rim letters. Almost imperceptible, but not quite. The collector's heart began to race. He compared it to another 1939 penny. The normal one held its shape, its letters crisp and confident. But this one, the error wavered. Not due to wear. Not from time. But from birth. Ingram's hands trembled slightly. His mind spun with possibilities. Could it be a minor die clash? A weak strike? No. It was deeper than that. It looked, to his trained eye, like the result of a transitional hub misalignment. Something unusual had occurred in the creation of the die itself. Perhaps a hub intended for a prior year or altered in a subtle way had been used, then quickly corrected. But not before at least a few coins were struck. Still, without confirmation, it remained a curiosity. He reached out to other collectors, hesitant at first, careful not to overstate. Most dismissed it, said it was likely post-mint damage. But one numismatist, a seasoned expert from Pennsylvania, requested to see it. Ingram mailed it off, insured and nervously wrapped in velvet. Weeks passed. Then came the call. The expert's voice was calm, but tinged with something that stopped Ingram's breath. "It's real," he said. "It's not damage. It's an error. A legitimate, mint-produced anomaly." And suddenly, everything changed. At first, the value was modest. Maybe a few dollars above face value. But word spread in hushed circles. Collectors whispered about it at coin shows. A few more surfaced, only a handful, and each carried slightly different characteristics: as if each had been born from a different phase of the flawed die's life. Some bore doubling on the obverse, a ghostly echo of Lincoln's date. Others, like Ingram's, had the misaligned E and a suspiciously thick rim on one side. What started as a singular oddity began to take shape as a pattern. The market shifted slowly. In the 1970s, Ingram was offered $80 for the coin. He declined. By the early 1980s, the offer rose to $300. Still, he held it close, sensing it wasn't done revealing itself. Then, in 1993, a collector in Arizona sold a similar coin authenticated and graded for just over $1,200. That lit the spark. Coin grading services began listing it under a formal variety, the 1939 Double Die Reverse Type E. What made it so mysterious wasn't just the doubling, but the fact that the error was inconsistent. It varied slightly from coin to coin. Some appeared almost pristine, the doubling clean and visible, while others only hinted at the flaw. That inconsistency frustrated graders, intrigued collectors, and infuriated skeptics. But then came the twist. In 2004, a researcher digging through the National Numismatic Collection at the Smithsonian stumbled upon a 1939 wheat penny labeled Experimental Reverse. It had no known counterpart. The reverse design was subtly different from the final production coinage. The stalks of wheat were wider, their detail more pronounced, and the font on 1 cent matched precisely the distorted style of Ingram's penny. No record existed of this design being approved or struck for circulation. Could it be that during the 1939 production year, the mint briefly experimented with a revised die, a prototype reverse intended to enhance the wheat design's legibility? And in doing so, struck a small number of test coins with it before reverting? It explained the inconsistencies, the scattered nature of the error, the brief window in which they were made. And perhaps most thrilling of all, admit Ingram's coin might not have been an error in the traditional sense, but a fragment of a discontinued design. Collectors were stunned. Suddenly, prices surged. In 2006, a high-grade example sold for over $9,000. By 2011, a mint state version crossed the $15,000 threshold. But still, the true ceiling remained elusive. The coins were too rare, too little understood, to command the attention of mainstream collectors. They lived in the undercurrent of the numismatic world, part myth, part confirmed fact. Then, quietly, in 2019, an anonymous buyer paid $27,500 for a pristine example with razor-sharp doubling and a full wheat reverse. It was never publicly displayed, nor was its photo released. But the transaction was confirmed, and it changed the landscape once more. Now, even low-grade examples fetched over $2,000 if the error was visible. The thirst for one of these rare 1939 variants had become palpable. Still, questions lingered. How many exist? Were they produced only at the Philadelphia Mint? Or could San Francisco have struck a few? A rumor spread in 2023 of a Denver-marked coin with similar characteristics, but no proof emerged. It only added fuel to the fire. And now, in present time, the 1939 wheat penny error sits at a crossroads of mystery and prestige. It's more than copper in design. It's the story it tells of a mistake, or perhaps a glimpse of a different direction in U.S. coinage history. Every collector who holds one feels it. That this tiny object passed through the fingers of history, slipped unnoticed through time, only to surface when the world was ready to see it. There's no flash to it, no gleaming gold or silver. It doesn't glitter, but it haunts. Ingram, now long past, kept meticulous notes, handwritten journals tracing his correspondence with experts, sketches of the coin under magnification, hypotheses about its origin. Those journals now reside in the Coin History Archives in Chicago, where they're consulted by researchers tracing the ripple effects of that one quiet discovery. New collectors arrive every year, chasing the whispers of that 1939 error. They flipped through penny rolls from estate sales, antique stores, and family jars that have sat untouched for generations. Most find only ordinary wheat cents, beautiful in their own right, but common. But once in a while, just once, the distorted E reveals itself again. And in that moment, the air changes. A breath is held. The past slips through, briefly visible in copper, and light dot in no one knows how high the value might climb next. Some say it could rival five-figure rarities from earlier centuries. Others believe it's only just begun. After all, if the Smithsonian's experimental reverse is linked to these errors, the implications are staggering. It redefines not only the coin, but the entire year's production history. And somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten coin jar or hidden drawer, another piece waits. Unseen, waiting for the next pair of careful hands, waiting for its story to be told. In 1941, the world tilted on the brink of transformation. War rippled across continents, and the United States, though not yet drawn into global combat, stirred with preparation. Steel and copper, once mundane metals, were reassessed as instruments of war. The U.S. Mint, humming tirelessly, pressed coins with an almost mechanical devotion, ensuring commerce would not stall. Among those millions of copper pennies struck that year, unnoticed and uncelebrated, was a batch that would, decades later, whisper secrets from beneath their worn surfaces. From the Philadelphia Mint alone, over 887 million one-cent coins were produced in 1941. Denver added 128 million more, and San Francisco contributed over 92 million. The Lincoln wheat penny, as it was commonly known, carried the same familiar image of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, with wheat stalks flanking the words, 1 cent, on the reverse. It was a coin so common it passed from hand to hand without a second glance, nestled in candy jars, grocery tills, and dusty coat pockets. But not all of them were ordinary. In a quiet Arizona suburb in the late 1990s, an amateur coin enthusiast named Harold Ferguson sifted through a forgotten coffee tin filled with wheat pennies, collected over years by his father. The tin had sat in the attic for decades, neglected but never discarded. One evening, with the TV murmuring in the background, Harold began sorting them by date. His eyes lingered on a dull brown penny marked 1941. At first glance, it seemed typical. But when the light hit just right, something curious surfaced, something subtle. Harold noticed an oddity in the lettering of Liberty. The B looked swollen, distorted, as if melted at the edges. He dismissed it as corrosion, a consequence of decades spent in a dusty tin. But then he spotted another 1941 penny in the collection. The difference between the two was startling. The second coin had crisp, clean lettering. Harold leaned closer, adjusting his magnifier. That's when he saw it. The date on his strange coin seemed doubled, almost as if the numbers had been echoed by a shadow. Doubled die? The term lingered in his thoughts. Harold wasn't a seasoned numismatist. He had never handled rare coins or attended an auction. But instinct told him this anomaly might be more than wear and tear. He reached out to a local coin club, sending a photograph and a brief description. Responses trickled in. Most were polite dismissals. But one reply stood out. A retired mint worker named Alan Keegan wrote back, asking Harold to send the coin for a closer inspection. 2 weeks later, the response arrived in a plain envelope with Alan's handwritten note. What you have is real. Extremely rare. Be careful. The coin was confirmed as a 1941 double die obverse, one of the most elusive errors known among Lincoln cents. Unlike the better-known 1955 or 1969 S double dies, the 1941 version had slipped under the radar. It was so subtle, so perfectly masked by age and patina, that few had ever noticed it. Yet under magnification, the doubling was undeniable. The date, the motto, "In God We Trust," and even parts of Lincoln's eye appeared doubled. Allen explained further. The error likely occurred during a misalignment in the hubbing process, a mechanical mishap, where the die used to imprint the design on the coin had received more than one impression out of sync. The result was a faint yet definitive doubling, detectable only to the trained eye. Why hadn't it been caught? Because 1941 was a year of rushed production. With war looming, the mint prioritized volume over perfection. Word of Harold's discovery began to circulate within specialized circles. Coin collectors and error specialists discussed it on forums, initially skeptical. But photos and certification began to change minds. It wasn't long before whispers turned into bidding.at first. Modest offers came in $300, then $700. To Harold, it was astonishing. A coin he hadn't known existed a month ago was now drawing more attention than anything else in his modest collection. But he held on to it, uncertain of its full potential. He watched the market, quietly. In the early 2000s, another example surfaced, this time in Ohio, found in a collection inherited by a retired railroad worker. Then a third was confirmed at a coin show in Oregon. Suddenly, what had been a single oddity became a verified rarity. Only 3 known specimens, each confirmed with the same peculiar doubling, especially around Lincoln's profile and the date. Coin grading services authenticated them, ranking their condition meticulously. Harold's was the finest. As the number of known examples remained stagnant, their desirability grew. By 2009, the coin had reached $5,000 at a private auction. A decade later, it appeared briefly in a collector's exhibit in Denver, behind glass, accompanied by a placard that read, 1941 double die obverse, one of the rarest known Lincoln errors. And still, few knew the whole story. The real twist wouldn't emerge until a 4th coin surfaced in 2021, this one misattributed as a 1941S. A young collector named Olivia Martinez found it while cataloging a bulk purchase from an estate sale. At first, it seemed damaged. The doubling was faint but visible under magnification. She compared it to reference images online and immediately recognized similarities to Harold's coin. But hers had a difference. Olivia's specimen showed a reverse anomaly, a clash mark, faint but distinct, near the right wheat stalk. This detail sparked controversy. Error experts began to speculate. Was the 1941 double die part of a broader error run that also included die clashes? If so, it could point to a more systemic issue at the mint that year, perhaps even a misalignment during a transition in die preparation equipment. There were no official records confirming this, of course, but the speculation ignited further excitement. Auction houses began to hunt for more examples. Every 1941 penny now became a subject of scrutiny. Dealers reported increased demand, and even worn, common versions sold for a premium. Collectors were hoping, praying, that their coins might reveal the whisper of a shadow, a ghostly doubling in Lincoln's eye, or the curve of a swollen letter. Harold, by then in his late 70s, had watched his coin's value transform with quiet wonder. What had once rested beside bent paperclips and old screws was now coveted by institutions and investors alike. Offers crossed $15,000, then $25,000. Still, he waited. In 2024, at a private auction in Chicago, Harold's 1941 double die penny graded MS65 red-brown was finally sold. The bidding war was fierce, drawn out between a private museum and an anonymous collector with a reputation for acquiring impossible rarities. The final gavel dropped at a stunning $87,000. But the story didn't end there. Shortly after the sale, the new owner had the coin re-examined with advanced imaging technology. The results shocked even the most jaded numismatists. The doubling wasn't just a product of hub misalignment. The coin showed microscopic stress patterns consistent with a mishubbing during an experimental shift in die hardening techniques the mint had quietly piloted in 1941. A short-lived method that left behind faint but unique imprints under the die's surface. This meant that Harold's penny wasn't just an error, it was a silent witness to an undocumented phase in mint production history. A mechanical hiccup during a transition that was never recorded in public logs. Only a handful of coins bore that fingerprint. Historians began re-examining other coins from 1941 with new scrutiny. The narrative shifted. It wasn't just a double die. It was a vestige of a forgotten change, a relic of a behind-the-scenes experiment cloaked in wartime secrecy. The story of the 1941 penny transformed from that of a collector's oddity to a small but tangible piece of hidden history. Today, only 5 confirmed examples of the 1941 double die obverse penny exist. Each carries a story not only of rarity, but of rediscovery, of overlooked legacy, and of the intricate imperfections that breathe humanity into even the most mechanical systems. From the hum of the mints machines in 1941 to the hush of auction rooms 8 decades later, the coin has traveled through time quiet, constant, yet never quite ordinary. The year was 1948. America was recovering from the turbulence of World War II, breathing the first steady breaths of peace. Factories had shifted from wartime production to consumer goods, and the economy was beginning to blossom. In this period of transition, everyday objects gained subtle important symbols of stability in a changing world. And none were more ubiquitous than the humble penny. The Lincoln wheat cent, still proudly bearing Abraham Lincoln's stern gaze, and flanked by twin wheat ears on its reverse, continued its quiet duty across the country. More than 317 million of these 1-cent coins were struck at the Philadelphia Mint that year. Another 172 million came from Denver, and over 81 million from San Francisco. There was no fanfare, no commemorative issue. Just a continuation of tradition, a coin largely unchanged since its debut in 1909. But within the regularity of this process, a small disruption occurred. One that, at first, left no trace in any record. It was subtle, camouflaged by the sheer volume of coins produced. And for decades, it remained hidden. It wasn't until the fall of 1983 that a coin dealer named Miriam Lowell came across something she couldn't quite explain. She was sorting through a lot of old wheat pennies purchased from a retired machinist who had spent his life working at the Union Pacific rail yards. The coins were dusty, circulated, and ordinary. Most bore the wear and tear of time nicks, dull edges, faded luster. She had handled thousands just like them. But then, there it was. A 1948 penny that caught her attention not with its brilliance, but its peculiarity. Something was off. The word, Liberty, looked cramped, almost crushed toward the edge of the coin. The B seemed barely formed. Miriam thought it might be post-mint damage. She set it aside, more out of curiosity than expectation. It wasn't until she examined the reverse that a deeper question began to form. The wheat stalks, typically strong and well-defined, looked misaligned. Almost warped, like they'd been twisted or shifted at the moment of striking. There was no clear doubling, at least not the kind she had seen on more infamous errors like the 1955 double die. But there was something else. A tilt. A deformation. Something beneath the surface. She consulted the red book. No mention. She called colleagues. No consensus. Some thought it might be die deterioration. Others waved it off as damage. But Miriam's instincts, honed from years of chasing errors and anomalies, refused to let it go. She sent it to a grading service, submitting it with a note. Possible misalignment or design shift, please evaluate carefully. Weeks passed. When the coin returned, the label read, 1948 1C obverse die cap AU details. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the diagnosis. A die cap error? On a wheat penny? From 1948, such errors were rare. Incredibly rare. A die cap occurs when a coin fails to eject properly and gets struck again and again onto the die face, forming a literal cap around it. Subsequent coins struck by that distorted die bear its warped imprint, creating bizarre and often grotesque results. Miriam's coin had not suffered the cap itself, but it bore the ghostly shadow of having been struck after the die was damaged by such a cap. The misalignment, the compressed lettering, the odd curvature of the wheat stalks, it all made sense. This wasn't just any mint error. It was part of a sequence caused by one of the most traumatic mechanical failures in coin production. And it had gone unnoticed for 35 years. News traveled slowly at first. Die cap errors weren't widely collected in the early 80s. Miriam offered it quietly at shows, gauging interest. One collector in Cincinnati offered her $250, which she declined. Another offered to trade several Tone Morgan dollars in exchange. Still, she hesitated. Something about the coin made her feel it had more to say. She held on to it through the 90s, as interest in mint errors began to swell. Specialized publications and clubs sprang up, fueled by a growing fascination with the mechanics of the mint. It wasn't long before someone recognized the coin for what it truly was, not just an error, but an early and unusually well-preserved relic of a significant malfunction. Error specialists requested high-resolution images. One researcher even proposed that the Philadelphia Mint had run an overnight shift that week in January of 1948 due to backlog demand, potentially creating the perfect storm for unnoticed errors. By 1997, the coin had been featured in a small numismatic journal article titled Echoes of a Die Cap, the Forgotten 1948 Obverse Deformation. That publication changed everything. Suddenly, collectors began revisiting their 1948 cents. A few others surfaced, none in as sharp a condition, none with quite the same characteristics, but clearly part of the same lineage. Each bore signs of the same error: compressed lettering, warped wheat stalks, and a distinctive depression just below Lincoln's chin. It was as if the coin had been pulled downward at the moment of creation. Auction houses began to take notice. In 2001, one example graded VF35 sold privately for $950. In 2006, another in EF condition sold for $2,100. Then Miriam's original coin, now graded 53 Australian dollars by PCGS, was put up for sale. The auction buzzed with anticipation. Some called it a fluke. Others hailed it as a foundational piece for error collectors. The bidding opened at $5,000. Within minutes, it passed $10,000. Then $12,500. A collector from New York and a dealer from California pushed it past $16,000 before the gavel fell. The final price, $16,750. Yet the coin's secrets weren't entirely revealed. 2 years after the sale, the new owner, an error coin archivist named Roland Pratt, undertook a deep dive analysis using specialized imaging equipment. He discovered something the graders hadn't caught. Along the edge of the obverse, barely visible under 40x magnification, were pressure ripples, microscopic wave patterns indicating rotational force during striking. This meant the coin wasn't just struck from a damaged die, it had likely rotated slightly during the strike, capturing the energy of a malfunctioning press. It bore not only the image of Lincoln, but the kinetic scars of the machinery itself. This discovery reframed the coin's importance. It wasn't merely a product of a die cap, it was the result of a rare convergence. A cap die, combined with a press malfunction and a die rotation. 3 errors converging in a single moment. A trifecta of failure captured in copper. Soon, theories emerged. Some believe this error happened in a very narrow production window, perhaps less than an hour. Others speculated that only a handful of coins made it out before the press was halted and corrected. Either way, the number of known examples remained under a dozen. Roland's coin, regraded with new annotations, was estimated to be worth over $40,000. But he never sold it. Instead, he displayed it sparingly, once at the A&A Money Show and once at a Smithsonian special exhibit on minting mishaps. There, children and seasoned collectors alike stared through glass at a copper coin that had no business surviving. A coin born in error, preserved by chance, and elevated by mystery. The twist that no one expected came in 2020. A metal composition analysis of one of the 1948 die-cap series coins revealed a trace impurity zinc levels slightly above normal for the era. Intrigued, metallurgists at a private lab ran a full-spectrum analysis. The results showed that this coin, and possibly others from the same era batch, were struck on planchets intended for testing purposes, blanks not meant to be in circulation at all. Internal mint memos from 1947 hinted at experimental batches being tested for post-war planchet composition stability. Some had theorized they were destroyed after testing. Yet somehow, one or more of those blanks had been fed into the coin press at the exact moment the die cap and press rotation error occurred. This made the 1948 era coin more than rare. It was now potentially a transitional mystery, an unauthorized hybrid of material and malfunction, combining physical uniqueness with mechanical failure and historical context. No other wheat penny shares quite this pedigree. Today, among the tens of millions of 1948 Lincoln wheat cents still circulating in collections and jars across the country, fewer than 12 of the die-cap sequence are known. Only one is confirmed to have been struck on the test composition blank. And all emerged quietly, unexpectedly, from unassuming origins: estate sales, junk lots, coin club auctions. Each one, in its own way, tells a story that stretches from the roaring presses of the Philadelphia Mint to the hushed corners of collector forums and showcases. And none more so than the first, plucked from obscurity by a sharp-eyed dealer who knew, even through the patina of age, that this penny was whispering something no one else had yet heard.